Alright, YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So let's get straight into this video. I want to talk about how you're a one-man army. Alright, so if you're watching this video, you probably know that you're somebody who faces many enemies alone. And these enemies could have been actual people, or these enemies could have came through the form of spiritual warfare, through the form of things like addiction, sickness, through the form of poverty, through the form of some type of oppression, right? Some type of oppression in the mind, some type of oppression in the body, some type of oppression in the spirit, right? So throughout your whole life, you've probably always been this person who's been kind of like battling things alone, right? You've gone through a lot of things alone and you've beat a lot of things alone. And if you look at the Bible, when you look at the story of Moses, right? Moses came alone to the Pharaoh, but he wasn't really alone. He was alone as in what you see, he's alone, but he had God on his side, right? And he was telling the Pharaoh to let the Israelites go, otherwise they're going to be punished, right? But they wouldn't listen. So he was the type of person who was a one-man army. He was doing these things himself, right? It was all him. And you're the same in this way. You face all types of enemies alone. You could have had multiple people come up against you, right? Throughout your whole life, just to hate on you or to try to put you down or try to mock you, try to attack you, to try to do all types of things. It's always been multiple people versus you, right? Because that's how powerful you are, because you have such a strong light, because your light comes from Christ. And you're able to stand tall alone, right? Because you have a lot of power. You may not even know it yet, or if you do, which is good, because it's true. But if you don't know it yet, you have a lot of power inside of you, because that power comes from God, right? And the Spirit of God gives us power and a sound mind and love, right? That's who you really are. So that's what makes you so courageous. That's what makes you able to stand on your lonesome and defeat all these enemies, right? Because you're a whole one-man army. And this is what causes God to isolate you as well, because you might have been in seasons of like isolation, and you might even like isolation yourself, but isolation is never a good thing for a long time, but you may like it yourself for like a certain amount of time. But when God isolates you too, that's when he builds you, right? Because you're pushed away for a different type of purpose. You're separated from the world, right? You're separated from the people around you. You're just completely different. So he pulls you aside and isolates you, right? And during that isolation is when you find out a lot of things about yourself. You find out what's going on. You find out the truth about a lot of things. You find out the truth of who you are. You find out the truth about what you're supposed to be doing. And in isolation, you stay protected, right? This is why God isolates you. Anybody that's chosen, they're protected by God, right? God sends his angels around people he chooses, right? Because you're protected. And this is what makes you stay isolated, because in isolation, that's where you're safe. In isolation, you're not around people who could attack you or things who could destroy you, right? You're not around these things. So he keeps you protected. And while he keeps you protected, he also develops your abilities. He also reveals your abilities to you, right? And everyone's situation is unique. But anyone who's ever had a big purpose has gone through a lot of isolation. You've had to be this type of like one-man army for a long time. And when I say one-man army, you don't have to be only a man. You could be a woman as well. I just say one-man army, this one-person army, right? And your ability to conquer every single thing thrown your way is astonishing, right? Like it's a thing that no one's probably ever said it to you, right? But people have probably seen like the stuff that you do, and you do all these things alone, and people get like inspired by it, or they get wowed by it. They're like, how does this person just walk alone and just do all these things, right? That's how much power and strength that you have. You're a whole one-man army. You don't need the help of other people. And help from other people is good. But the help that you need comes from God. That's the true help, right? This is why isolated a lot because God is the one who's helping you. God is the one who's putting things in your spirit. God is the one who's leading you to do the right thing, right? God's leading you the whole time, and he can't have you around too many distractions and people and all these things, because if he does that, then you're going to stray. You're going to stray off the path. You're going to stray off the path. So he always brings you in back to isolation, back to prayer, back to talking to him, right? Back to just dwelling in his presence. And whatever it is that you've gone through or going through, these all started when you were really young. This is why I like to talk about, if you're chosen, you've had things happen ever since you were really young, right? You've had things happen that make no sense ever since you were young. You've had just odd situations, weird situations. You've had knowledge to where, like, you don't know where it came from, right? Because when you were really young, you could have had so much knowledge to where, like, you could have had things like teachers or authority figures or something like that get kind of envious of you when you're really young. You could have been exposed to envy at a really young age, right? And envy at a young age is odd. Most kids get jealous of each other, but like, they get jealous of each other for little things, right? But you probably went through actual true envy from other people, and it didn't have to be people your age when you were young. It could have been like way older people, right? You suffered like true envy to where, like, you were hated. Just as Jesus said, as the world hated me, they're going to hate you, right? So you're going to be hated because you're not of the world. You're enemy of the world. You're kind of a villain in the world, right? But an enemy of the world is a friend of God, right? That's how you've always been. And the only reason you're an enemy of the world is because you expose the truth to people. Because the world has been ran on lies, oppression, sin, just wicked things, right? The world has done wicked things since the beginning of time. And you're the complete opposite of that, right? You bring God into it. You bring righteousness, right? And you've always been doing that. This is why you've probably always had like this high morality about you. And people didn't know where it came from, where you got this morality. But you just naturally had like a morality to you. It's like you're always the quote unquote bigger person. You're always the person who was like empathetic towards people and things, right? You're always that type of person. And the world, since it's wicked, saw that, right? And the world doesn't like anything that's good, because the world is ran by the prince of this world, which is the devil, right? And the devil just wants to destroy everything that's of God, everything that's good. So once the devil sees anything that's good, he's going to try to destroy it, right? This is where your spiritual warfare came from. This is where your battles came from. This is where your oppression came from. This is where your struggle came from, right? It all comes from the enemy. But God knows this, and God is with you, right? And God has given you a sword, which is his word. And the things that you speak are like a sword, because you speak through the Spirit of God, right? This is why you probably have a tone to yourself to where your words are really piercing, right? Your words are really powerful. They're just really powerful in general. Like, you could say the same thing someone else said, but the way that you said it just hit differently. It hits in the spirit. The way you speak hits the spirit, right? The things that you say hit the spirit. The things that you say are all just truth. You just speak authentically. You speak truthfully, right? You say the truth about it because you have a spirit of discernment, so you discern things. And you've been this way throughout your whole life, right? So this is why you could have even been a child and you could have had like a teacher and a whole grown adult hate on you, right? Be mad at you, treat you unfairly, right? Just because you know the truth about a situation, just because you're exposed to a certain thing. Like maybe you could have had a teacher to where the teacher was maybe doing something unjust, as in like giving the class work on something that they never taught, right? Like the class knows they've never been taught this, and maybe they get quizzed on it or something, and everyone's like, wait, we never even learned this, right? But you would open up your mouth about it and then be like, I don't think you ever taught us this. And then the teacher would get mad at you and be like, I'm the teacher here, you're not, right? And they'll tell you stuff like that, but the whole time you know the truth, you're just like, you still never taught us this, right? That's just an example, but you've always been that type of person. That's what you came here to do. You expose evil, right? You expose lies. You only bring stuff that's just, and because you carry the Spirit of God, which is just and love, right? So you bring love and justice into it. So this is why you've had people come up against you. Like it's usually always been you versus multiple people. So if we're talking about people here, it's been you versus multiple people throughout your whole life. And this could have started, like I said, at a young age. Could have had multiple people at one shot to attack you. Could have had multiple people at one shot to do stuff behind your back, right? Team up against you, right? Because you're that powerful. No one could go one-on-one against you, right? Because you're that strong. And it's not just physical strength, it's just the natural spiritual strength that you have. You're that powerful. So they've seen that. They've seen the strength that you have. So they're going to try to bring you down, right? That's why you're a one-man army, because you're fighting enemies on your lonesome, right? Multiple enemies on your lonesome. And this is what someone who's chosen does, right? Because we live in a world that's fallen. We live in a world has a lot of evil in it, a lot of wickedness in it. You bring justice to the world, right? You expose injustice. You expose things that are evil. You bring justice. So you're going to be met with resistance from enemies, right? Because you get that courage from God, because God's spirit is that powerful, right? Give you a spirit of power. So you've likely might have even been the type of person that's always been like courageous to say things, courageous to do certain things, courageous to, not follow what you're supposed to do. You've always been this courageous type of person, because that courage comes from God, right? And just know, if you're watching this video and you truly resonate with this video, just know that you're a one-man army. And if you're watching this, you probably already know that you're this type of person. You probably already know that you've probably been this type of person. You've always been the one that's like different. You've always just been different. You've always just been like, you've always felt like you just didn't like truly like fit in with the things. And the only reason you didn't fit in is because you're not of this world, but the things that the world does just don't resonate with you. You're like, nah, I'm not doing that. Like, why would I do that? That's lame, right? Or that's not right. So that's the reason why you haven't fit in with the world, right? And you shouldn't even want to fit in with this world, but we're always pressured as a young age to fit in, to do the same things, right? Say the same things, believe the same things, right? It's just a lot of pressure, right? Pressure to conform. But being who you are, even with that pressure to conform, you always knew what was right. You always had this conviction about you. So you're in situations, whatever the situation is, and like everyone's doing it and everyone thinks it's right. And then when you go see that whatever the said situation or thing is, and you're like, no, this is wrong. Like I'm not doing that, right? Even though like most people like to follow and do the same things, even if it's something that's wrong that destroys them, they want to follow, right? But for you've always had this conviction, and you just felt like whatever it is that people were doing was wrong, right? And that conviction is true because it comes from God. You know that it's wrong. And since you've always had this conviction, that's what has made you have so much conflict in your life, because people know that you see through what they're doing or who they are, or whatever the situation is, you see through it. So naturally, you're going to get attacked about it. Naturally, they're going to try to put you down so you don't expose these things, right? This is what someone who's chosen does. So yeah, just know, if you're watching this video, you're a true one-man army. Whether you're a man or a woman, this is how you are. You stand tall on your own. You have a lot of power. You deal with things alone. You battle a lot of enemies alone. You have a lot of power through the way that you move, through the way that you talk, through the knowledge that you have. You just have a lot of raw power about you. It's like a natural power that you have. The Spirit of God has given us is a spirit of power, right? That's where it comes from. So you just have that raw power because it comes from God. And since it comes from God, you're also empathetic. So you have this high amount of power and this high amount of discernment, but you've never in your life used it for evil, right? Even if you're ever tempted to use it for evil, the conviction's way too strong. You're like, nah, I can't do that. I can only use this for good, right? So that's just who you are. You're a being of light. You're the light of this world, as Jesus said. You bring the light to the world, right? In a dark world, you bring the light. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Of course, don't forget to like, don't forget to comment. And if you're not subscribed already, don't forget to subscribe. All right, God bless you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.